episode of Framing New Heights. My name is Michael Hicks. I am your host with the most today. And today, before we bring on our wonderful guests, I want to give you a word from our sponsors. Unlock your true full potential with Live to Thrive Life Coaching. Are you ready to transform your life one step at a time? At Live to Thrive, we believe in the power of small, consistent improvements. Our unique framework focuses on becoming 1% better in mind, body, and soul every single day. What do we offer? Thanks for asking. Well, we offer the mind. What does it do? It develops a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. We enhance your mental clarity and conquer challenges with confidence and full self esteem. Also, body. Embrace a healthier, more fulfilled, energetic lifestyle with 3 published ebooks, workouts sent to your email, and boost your energy levels and achieve your ultimate fitness goals. And ultimately, the purpose, which I call soul. Discover your true purpose. Cultivate inner peace and live a fulfilling, balanced life because you need to be put on a path of direction and discover your purpose. As a dedicated life coach with nearly 25 years of experience, I will guide you on your journey to personal excellence, helping you overcome obstacles and reach new heights. Together, we'll create a customized plan to tailor your unique needs and aspirations. So join Live to Thrive today and start living your best purposeful life. All you got to do is schedule a free consultation by going to www.liv2thrive.com. And our next sponsor, unlock better sleep and pain relief with Amish tested CBD oil. Now, are you struggling with sleepless nights or constant aches and pains or premium CBD oil tested and trusted by the Amish community? Is your solution for natural relief and restful nights? Are you ready for it? Are you ready for that next piece? Well, guess what? A special offer for only Framing New Heights listeners. For a limited time, receive 50% off at checkout with promo code New Heights. Why CBD oil? I'm going to tell you why. It's Amish tested, proven quality of effectiveness. You can sleep better, so say goodbye to restless nights and hello to peaceful slumber. Pain relief, it also soothes your aches and pains naturally and effectively. So don't miss out. Make sure you go to envitamins.com and use the promo code, all caps, New Heights, at checkout and claim a 50% discount. So join the Framing New Heights community and start living a free and well rested today. All right, everybody. I'm super excited about this gentleman. And I'm bringing him to the podcast today. He's been extremely flexible in his wonderful schedule because he is a busy man, obviously providing value to so many other people in his industry. And we're going to get into so many cool, authentic, organic questions today. So please welcome the one and only Bill Lennan. Did I say that correctly?
Yes, you did.
Yes. No failures so far. All right. I love it.
We're winning
Bill,
it.
how are you, my man?
What's that?
How are you?
I'm good. Yeah, it's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. Other than the sun shining in on the side of my face through the curtains.
I love it. I just want to kind of tell and break down the listeners. I kind of stumbled on Bill. I think it was TikTok.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
You've been like the third person I brought on from TikTok, and the amount of value that you provide is truly exceptional. And I don't want to talk too much about it. I want you to kind of give everybody your elevator speech. So if you had your ideal avatar, your ideal client that you are about, what would you say to them in an elevator speech? So kind of give us everybody who you are, what you do, what kind of value you provide.
Sure. So my name is Bill Lennan, and I've been running software teams here in Silicon Valley for 20 plus years, which a lot of people can say that. What's unusual about my teams is that consistently they delivered results that people said was impossible. That happened over and over and over again. And it happened so often. I had execs and peers come to me and say, look, what are you doing? Because we don't know how to replicate your results. Your teams are happy. They're super high performing. What are you doing? And for a lot of years, I didn't know how to explain what I was doing. 5 years ago, I started getting some clue from an occupational therapist about how to break down what I was doing and turn it into a system so that anybody else could do exactly what I'm doing. And at the core of this, there's what I call the 5 pillars of effective leadership. And those 5 pillars are communication, emotional resilience, mental models, understanding power dynamics, and habits. And like you talking about getting 1% better every day, that's also the way that we look at effective team leadership and really helping your people to operate at a much, much higher level.
Yeah, and that's beautiful, and it's interesting that you talked about. I heard one of the biggest key pillars that I use in some of my programming is resiliency. I like how you
Mhm.
said emotional resilience, and my whole thought pattern is resilience is one step. Anti-fragility, I think, is a
Oh, yeah.
next step. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like you have conquered so many things that you have the anti-fragility. Talk to us and let the listeners know, what do you mean by emotional resilience?
Yeah, great question. Um, and I love how this goes organically. That's awesome. That's very good. So one of the things that I've noticed, and this was kind of early on, one of my strengths was that I was willing to do things that my peers found to be too uncomfortable emotionally, right? I would talk with strangers. I would um, go and do research. I went to networking events despite having really bad social anxiety. Like all these different things that I was willing to do was because I came to the tech world with a really high level of emotional resilience because of skills I'd learned as a kid. And I took it for granted. And it wasn't until um, the occupational therapist actually pointed this out to me. Her work is mostly in the mental health world, and she said, "Oh, well, you're using all these mental health skills.
Hmm.
You're using them for performance. Most people just use them clinically to get out of a hole, but I was actually using them for performance to get ahead. And it's like physical therapy, right? You can lift weights for PT to recover from an injury, or to get stronger and be much better at a sport. And so I was doing the emotional resilience version of that. It's a huge unlock because what I find is my peers stop their forward progress because it's emotionally uncomfortable to go whatever, talk to other people, to go learn about how other parts of the company are working, to help coach the people on their team to advance their careers, um, to find out why there's friction, to talk to people and be like, okay, what's going on in your life that is having you work slowly? That makes a lot of team leads really emotionally uncomfortable. I didn't have that problem, right?
Yeah.
Because and it's not just like for me, it was emotionally uncomfortable, but I went forward anyway, right?
Yeah, and I want to kind of uncover some things here, and
Yeah.
it's interesting because you talked, I just heard you say, you talked about social anxiety. Like it almost sounded like
Mhm.
you were afraid to talk to other people.
I was.
And now look at yourself,
Yeah.
right? Like you're in front of the camera all the time, providing extreme value. And we're gonna get your credentials and everything. We'll shoot that at the other pod so everybody can follow you and move along. I want to know because being a single father, I have a daughter, and I don't like to get too much business personally about her,
Mhm.
but I'm dealing with my little one, dealing with some social, emotional
Sure.
stuff. And how did you overcome that social anxiety piece to become the person that you are today? Because it's so beautiful. Because as a life coach, as a mindset coach, and what I brand and allow people to become is
Mhm.
the change, the transformation. And you talked a lot about you got to kind of go through the storm to get better, right?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Yeah.
Break it down, Bill. I want to hear
Yeah.
it. This is good stuff.
So I had, social anxiety for decades. And I assumed from all that time that this was just genetic, that there was nothing I could do to get out of it. And then I two things happened that made me realize I needed to change. One of them was I saw that my social anxiety was a real roadblock to my career progress. Like, 'cause I couldn't network, right? There was always, networking events and opportunities to talk to people, and I was paralyzed. And I couldn't go. And the other thing is, my first son was conceived, and as a parent, I realized I needed to model not having social anxiety, right? And so I was like, oh my God, I've got to figure out a way around this. And I was talking with a friend of mine who said, well, let's break it down, right? Let's break it down to what's the tiny starting point. And it was starting conversations with strangers. That was the baby step. And so what we came up with was a recipe that allowed me to start conversations with strangers. And the environment we used was Starbucks, because this is all about how to make you successful, right? And Starbucks, the baristas are paid to be nice to you. That's their day job, right? And so I just went in, I would order a cup of coffee or water or whatever. And then when I got it, I would say, how's your day going? And then whatever they said, I said, thanks, hope the rest of the day goes well, and I would leave. And as trivial as that might sound now, when I started doing it, it was terrifying. Like the very first time I was supposed to do it, I couldn't, I froze. I walked in, I got the coffee, and I walked out the door, I didn't say a word. And I was sweating and shaking, and I was like, oh my God, this is terrifying. Because it was such a new thing for me to do that. The next time I went in, I was able to mumble out, how's your day going? And I got some answer. I didn't even remember what they said. And I said, okay, thanks. I hope the rest of the day goes well. And I walked out the door, and I was like, yes, I did it once. And then I did it every day for the next 2 weeks.
Okay.
And that was what it took for me to realize I could do that, and no one was going to punch me in the face. No one was going to laugh at me. Nobody was going to criticize me. And then I was like, okay, what's the next level? What do I do next? And so the next baby step was going to 5-minute networking events.
So I got a couple things out of that. I got self-awareness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Let me ask you, how critical is self-awareness in personal relationships, being a father, in your career, in intimate relationships? Can you kind of break that down a little bit? Because that's what I got, and I get when I think Bill, when people truly can grasp that term and that wonderful way to excel and grow, you truly grow with success in your relationship. But I want to hear how important is this?
It's ridiculously important, and I've been doing it for so long that I just took it for granted.
Yeah.
I grew up swimming competitively, and you have to be very, very self-aware in the water. The coach is always like, little nuance of your stroke and breathing and everything else. And so that's just always been my environment. And what's going on in my head is also part of that self-awareness. And sometimes it's scary because we don't have good structures for teaching ourselves to be comfortable with what's going on inside of our heads. And so we have to find places and opportunities to learn how to approach that and how to get comfortable with ourselves.
Yeah. Like how to get comfortable being uncomfortable, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah.
That's where the growth truly happens. I want to kind of go back and talk a little bit about your background. Is unique and interesting. And so your journey. So let's talk about solving technical problems. We actually were talking to that prior to coming on.
Yeah.
And you're focusing on human challenges. Let me rephrase. So your journey from solving technical problems to focusing on human challenges is extremely fascinating to me. So what experiences in your early life, especially being raised on the islands, which I want to know more about, that's pretty cool, shape your approach to problem solving in general?
So my dad was in the military, and I grew up mostly in Hawaii. Also spent some time in the Philippines and on Guam,
Wow.
and plus we got bounced around. I lived in the time I was 14. We'd been at 7 different stations, um, and so I grew up thinking about the world as everything that I experience is interesting and unusual and different and adventures. And adventures almost always have problems to solve.
Yeah.
And at a certain point, I I realized, especially when I started getting over my social anxiety, that getting the people around me to operate better improved the quality of my life. Like I call this enlightened self-interest. Is that if the people around me are operating better, my world gets better. And so when I started leading software teams, I knew fundamentally that the better they operated, the better we would be perceived by our executives, right? The more productive we are and the happier they are, and those two things go together, the better the executives are going to like what we're doing. And in the long run, the more we can get of whatever it is that we need. We can get computers, we can get free time, we can get more money, bonuses, whatever it happens to be. That's all tied back to productivity. And so I I was lucky that when I was in college, I worked in this really good restaurant, and the one of the fundamentals of that restaurant was coaching. That when you started, you didn't know how to do anything. They hired people with no experience for the most part, and so I was being coached by people who had more experience at my role. And as soon as they hired somebody who knew less than me, I had to coach them.
Wow.
And so that was the career advancement was always, coaching other people who knew less and being coached by somebody who knew more. So that was how I operated in that environment. And so that became normal because it meant that I was leveling up my game. The other part is my dad had been running supply chains for the military, and he always said that his success was only available because his team did great work. And so he said, I just my job is to make sure they can operate successfully, and everything I can do to help them out is a win because they're going to operate better. That's what my job's all about. And so I kind of had those mental models when I started running my own teams, and and understanding that people could only operate to the level of their friction gave me the ability to look and go, okay, what's the friction, right?
Yeah.
Uh, and so I just started asking people in one-on-ones, like, what's going on in your life? Give me your complaints. And it was anything. Like I just didn't care what it was, right? It's hard to get to the first meeting in the morning because I got to get my kid to school, or my computer's slow, or there's an illness in the family, or I don't understand why we're building. Like it could be anything, right? And so I just started working on unwinding those frictions for my people, and they perform better.
Do you think it's almost a trust too? Because I mean, there's so much to unpack what you talked about there. Because man, I like how you said if my team's good, I'm going to be good. That even goes
Yeah.
along with our family, right?
Right.
Like
Yeah.
our family, our spouse, our significant other. Like you can even go down that realm. Gosh, there's so much to go there. And wow, I appreciate you sharing that, Bill. So let's talk about high functioning teams, because you got some big heavy hitters, my friend. You took some teams and delivered the impossible project that you talked about earlier.
Mhm.
So, and you have, I think Walmart, Google, are one of your big giants that you did. Can you share maybe a particular project or challenge that really tested your leadership, your technical skills the most? And then I got a second part to that question. Go ahead.
Yeah. So there's been a bunch. The when I went to Google, there's a few things about that were unusual. Number one, I had one interview. It lasted 20 minutes, and that was it. Um, and it was because the way that I approached the interview was I the job description was like made no sense whatsoever, and I actually refused the interview to begin with because I told the recruiter, like, I have no idea what you're looking for, and I don't want to waste my time or your time, and so like no. And they came back to me and said, no, we really want to talk to you, and the hiring manager really wants to talk with you. And I guess he'd seen my resume, and so I said, okay, fine, I'll talk with him. And I started asking him questions about the problem they wanted solved, and I'm like, what's going on here? And most of the questions he couldn't answer. And at 20 minutes, he said, look, here's the deal. You're thinking of questions and like going down the path of solving this problem in ways I've never considered. Clearly, you're the guy for the job. When can you start?
Wow.
Yeah. And I said, I need a couple of weeks to roll off this other project. So that was the starting point. And when I went in, he said, I don't even know where to send you. Like, there's a desk. Talk to these two guys because they're well connected in the company, and good luck. And then turned me loose. Like, that was the whole, that was it, right? He was like, come back and talk to me in 2 weeks. And so I'm like, okay, cool, and I ended up, I talked with these two guys. They weren't any help, but they were like, oh, talk to somebody else. It was like unraveling the Gordian knot, right? So I'm just going after pulling threads, trying to figure out what people know and how to solve the problem. And most of the people that I talked with said, oh, you can't do that. It's technically impossible and it's illegal. And I said, I never told anybody this to their face, but I knew they were wrong because I'd been working in the industry and I knew that other companies were doing exactly what they wanted, what my boss wanted to have happen. And I had to, number one, not have social anxiety be a problem, right? I just had to keep talking with people. And I had to be super persistent in the face of people saying, oh, you can't do that. Because the team behind me couldn't do anything until I got to who has the nuggets of information that I really need to make this work, right? Because ultimately, what I was expecting to do was build a software solution to solve the problem of connecting with software developers. Because so I'm hunting around, I'm literally talking to people all over the planet. And 4 months in, someone says, oh, there's these two guys you should talk with, random building in Mountain View. I'm like, okay, great. I'll add them to the list. And I reach out to them and they're like, oh yeah, we know how to solve that problem exactly. The interesting thing was that their boss had left and they had kind of become invisible.
Wow.
And they had all the solutions, they had all the legal stuff, they had all the technical, like everything was there, but they'd been forgotten about. And because I found them, my team was able to go, okay, great, let's get this thing out the door, let's get it launched, let's validate everything works. 2 weeks later, we were in production again. And it was all about emotional resilience.
Yeah.
And just saying, look, I know this isn't impossible.
Yeah.
I know this isn't illegal. I know other people are doing it. I'm going to keep asking questions until I find the right people. And so I just kept pushing it. Right.
Yeah. I like
that was,
go ahead,
yeah.
Bill. Go ahead, Bill. No,
Yeah. The other end of the spectrum, I worked for a social media agency for a while. And Walmart was our biggest client. And when I started, they told me, and they said, by the way, here's our tech stack. And it was old. And when Black Friday came around, the servers crashed.
Wow.
And 3 months later, January, the CTO came to me and said, "Hey, there's this new project I'd like you to look at." And I said, "Great, what do you want me to do?" And he said, "I'd like you to re-architect the whole platform." And I said, "Okay, that's, okay, cool, great." And he said, "There's a couple of caveats on that you have to know about." And I said, "Okay, sure. What's up?" And he said, "You need to finish it in time. You got 9 months to get done. And if you can't get done in 9 months, you're fired. And you got to talk to your team. And, you got to know this, right?" And I said, "Okay, that's exciting." And so this is a team that this is the team that I'd already taken from being the worst team in the company to being the best team in the company, over the course of the prior 10 months.
Okay.
And so I went back to him and I said, "Look, here's what's going on. Here's what they want. Here's the stakes." And they said, "Oh, we'll get it done for you. Don't worry. Not a problem." Now, mind you, the team had to learn a new operating system. They had to learn a new programming language, and they had to learn a new database in the process of building this thing out, right? And so I'm like, "Okay, cool. I trust that you guys will keep me employed." And it actually, we launched in 8 months.
Wow.
And they just crushed it. They were super productive. They had a very high level of ownership. We had amazing collaboration in there, and we got done and we got launched. And after it was out, the other funny thing about that was Black Friday came. Walmart had just launched this brand new digital couponing system.
Okay.
They hadn't load tested it well enough, and when Black Friday arrived, it crashed. And so we got way more traffic than we'd ever gotten before, because all these people complaining on social media.
Yeah.
And we were providing all the responses. And so not only do we get a ton more traffic than we would have, like this massive spike, but the beautiful part of it was our servers, because this architecture we'd done worked so well, but they didn't even care. So we went from crashing all the boxes to almost no load, which I was super proud of the team for having been able to do that kind of a design, right? Get that scale point. And after it was done, this was another one of those conversations with leadership when they said, like, we all knew this was a 12 to 15-month project. We were expecting to fire you. Like, that's what we planned on doing. You were going to be the scapegoat. But your team delivered in 8 months. Like, how? And at that point in time, all I knew how to say was, "Well, I take really good care of my people."
Yeah. Well, here's the other side to that too, Bill, is you don't accept the word can't. And I teach this in my framework, because it's what we say out of our mouth is who we become, right?
Right.
Subconsciously, what we talk about, our subconscious is a lot more powerful than our just who we are, conscious.
Right.
Conscious. So when we say that, it's impossible. And you are like the superhero of the word. That's unacceptable. And I love it. And
Thank you.
I appreciate that sincerely, because you can do whatever you want to do. Like, literally, and if you got the faith and you got the team, and that's, it's just so well said. And I significantly appreciate that. And for listeners that are listening out there, is like, Bill worked with companies that said it's impossible. You cannot. Now, just put that in perspective for yourself. You can. You just can. I want to ask you this, because you talk about communication as one of the first pillar of your system, and in a world dominated by digital communication, right? And I mean, we use our platforms a lot. And what strategy? Well, let me backtrack on that, because I was going to ask you a second question. Actually, you answered it. I was going to ask you, how did your approach evolve over time? I think you kind of answer that. So going back, is communication is the first pillar of your system. In a world dominated by digital communication, what strategies do you recommend for maintaining clear and effective communication to your teams? I think personally, you are just so organic, so authentic. Like, tell me what the hell you're dealing with. Like, everybody's dealing with something in their life that is maybe bleeding into their environment, their work, their career. So, talk to me on the communication part. How vital
Sure.
is that?
Yeah. So part of this is everything exists in levels, right? Um, I'll use math as a metaphor, right? Addition and subtraction is a level of math,
Yeah.
right? And we all learn that level, right? You go up the stack, you got multiplication, division, calculus. My older son's doing some kind of physics level math in college now. I completely don't understand it. But everything exists in levels, right? Your knowledge stops at whatever level you stop at. And what happens with communication is people get to a level and they don't know that there's way more levels ahead in their communication. And so they don't think consciously about what is it that this goes back to self-awareness. How is it that my communication isn't working well? And so I'm not getting the results that I want. Right. And so my approach when I started working on my social anxiety was to learn more about communication. And so I broke my communication down into two areas. And this is how we teach people. The first one is being super curious, asking questions. I need to learn stuff, like really understanding that your ignorance debt is a huge blocker for you moving ahead. And so I part of what I teach people on a day-to-day basis is how to be really curious, ask more questions, learn more, because you can't make good decisions if you don't have the data to really evaluate situations. And I want to understand more. Part of the reason that my teams have been so successful is I go out and scout for my team and I do research and I bring back knowledge that other people don't have. And so we're able to look at the world differently and solve problems differently because we've got a broader base of knowledge, right? And it's just because I'm curious and I encourage my team to be curious, right?
Yeah.
The other part is persuasion. And on the persuasion side, you have to understand other people's frames of reference and other people's success metrics versus your own. And so in the tech world, one of the things that I learned early on is that the executives have a different frame of reference, a different set of success metrics than the team leads or the engineers do. And if I want them to pay attention to me, I need to talk to them in their frame of references and in their success metrics and not in what my team says. Like I've got to be able to translate, right?
Yeah.
And once I translate it and I put it into their frame of reference, it's very easy to get a yes from them.
Interesting.
Assuming I've done all my homework, right?
Yeah.
And so, and what I found is that most people who are team leads or they're software engineers, they don't think this through because no one's ever explained this to them before. And so they go to their executives and they say, I need whatever because their own reasons. And the executive doesn't operate on that same frame, right? They don't operate in that same way of thinking about success metrics. And so they say no. I figure out how to translate that need into a way that the execs say, well, of course, that makes all the sense in the world. It's got a positive ROI for the company. And yes, absolutely, you can have the budget, right? And that's a key piece of persuasion.
It's a beautiful thing. How do you adopt? Because how do you adopt language? It's almost that's what I'm getting. Particular language, right? To the CEO, to the project manager, to the engineer. How do you adopt that piece? How do you gain that knowledge? Is it through research? Like, what is it? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So the curiosity part of it and talking to a lot of people helps me understand their success metrics, right? This is why I always start with curiosity, right?
Yep.
you have to hear people and listen to them and understand where they're coming from before you start talking to them about something as a pitch, right? Whatever, and I'm using the term pitch pretty broadly here, right? But the curiosity allows multiple things. Number one, they get to speak and they feel heard, right? And you listen to them and you're like, okay, tell me more about this, right? And you're getting the drill down on what's going on for them, right? Without judgment and without comment, right? Just I'm data gathering, right? I'm being an investigative journalist. I just want to gather data, right? And that gets me to a place of understanding whenever I go back to them and I want to propose an idea, I want to run an idea by them. I'm putting it into the context of what they've told me so that it fits their idea of what's important. And that's the translation, right? I'm putting into their idea of what's important. And I also do a lot of stakeholder validation before I get to the executive. So the re-engineering thing we did at the social media company, I went and talked with the folks that were the stakeholders that were going to be operating our social media tools. Both the director of operations who ran the whole team, and then a bunch of the people that actually work at lower levels, including the account managers for Walmart. Right. So I talked with them. I got to hear their perspectives. I ran everything I was doing by them before I ever went back to the executives to get approval for these architectural changes that actually required us to change company business processes and and expectations of how things worked inside the company. Right. That was kind of part of the whole re-architecting. But I wanted to make sure that I got all the buy-in from everybody else. Because then when I go to the executives and they say, oh, what about, what did this person say? I'm like, I already talked to all them. I already got their okays. If you want to back check me, you go talk to them and hear what they have to say because they all like it.
Yeah.
Right. And then the executive's like, okay, you've done your homework. Right. And they can trust the word you mentioned earlier. They can trust that what I'm proposing actually has broader appeal. And it's not just them getting snowballed.
That's so well said. Bill, so you basically, in a nutshell, you are growing major institutions. How does Bill Lennan stay current? How do you stay current? And how do you self-grow? Because, I mean, you provide all this vast value and knowledge to all these other companies. How does Bill keep growing?
You mentioned getting uncomfortable at the beginning of the podcast, and that's really the game. It's one of the things I learned as a kid was the value of discomfort and how me being willing to be uncomfortable got me my goals.
Wow.
Versus if I wasn't uncomfortable, then those goals didn't happen. And it was physical and emotional. Like I just kind of, that was the game. And to a degree, I think about rites of passage. Primitive cultures had rites of passage. We've kind of lost those in our modern times. But I always looked at rites of passage as being me going out and testing myself and proving to myself that I was worthy of whatever it was. Right. Yeah. This is like an internal challenge because I never wanted to feel like I wasn't worthy of something. And so that became the game was I'm going to go test myself in whatever way it happens to be. And I still do that. It's like, okay, what's the next uncomfortable thing to do? And really at the end of the day, the reason is it gives me more freedom in the world because the thing that stops everybody is their fear. And we can nibble away at our fear. This is how I got over my social anxiety. I started off by talking to strangers for less than 2 minutes. And then I went to 5-minute networking events. And then it was 15 minutes. And then it was doing presentations for my software team, like learning how to do presentations, right? Or people that I knew really, really well. And then it was presentations for multiple software teams. And then it was presentations for executives. And then, now I love public speaking, right? But I nibbled my way up the stack of my fears to have the freedom to do this in the world. And it's, I when I was a kid and I got into surfing, that I did the exact same thing. I went to the easy beaches first because I didn't know how to surf, and then I worked my way up the stack of difficulty. And every time it was, what's the next level that I can achieve and not have a catastrophic failure.
Yeah. What do you think about this statement? The opposite of fear, the opposite side, I should say, of fear creates success. Would you agree? Because you embrace, so you're scared to do something. Let's say you're afraid to do something.
Yeah.
But let's just use the example of I'm afraid to bungee jump.
Right.
Because bungee jump, which creates you're successful.
Right.
So,
right.
Do you agree? Do you disagree? I want to hear your thoughts on that.
I think there's a nuance in there that might not be obvious, and that is that when you have a fear of bungee jumping, but you do it anyway, right? Or you're afraid to talk to strangers, but you do it. You figure out how to do it anyway. You still have the fear. You're just recognizing the value of doing the action is more important than being stopped by the fear, and that's what courage is. Courage is being afraid and moving forward anyway. And too many people stop because they feel the fear and they're like, oh no, I can't do this, I'm afraid. And the solution is to have somebody there who can say, it's okay to be afraid. Fear's totally fine, totally normal. When I started doing this, I was afraid. But what I learned is that after 1,000 reps or 12 reps, it got to be easy.
Yeah.
And
easier.
In some cases, just straight up easy.
Yeah. Okay.
It took me I'm iterative, right? I'm doing these small baby steps, 1% better every day. To your point from earlier, when I get over my social anxiety, not my fear of public speaking. It took me 3 speaking engagements over 2 months to go from I'm afraid of public speaking to public speaking is really, really fun.
Wow.
And it was because I looked at it, I'd done all this work before, right? I knew how to talk to strangers. I knew how to do presentations. I'd been, doing presentations at work for years. And I'd never considered public speaking as even being possible, right? And then I got to this point where I had to get past that hurdle. And so I'm like, okay, how do I break this down? Back to the self-awareness point. What is it that I'm really afraid of? Right? Let's really break this down into the nuance of what scares me about public speaking. And I was able to get to the little pieces that I was afraid of. And then once I saw those, I'm like, oh, okay, well, I can build a recipe for this one and for this one and for this one and for this one. And I can time box it. So the first public speaking event that I did was 5 minutes. Right? 5 minutes. Small, right? And I got up and I spoke for 5 minutes, and then I was done, and I was sweating bullets, and got off the stage, introduced the next speaker, got off the stage, went to the back, and I asked somebody who had set up the event, and like, how was that? I've never done that before. And she was like, oh, it's totally fine. You look super relaxed and looked like it was great. And I'm like, okay, cool. That's one down, one rep.
That's
right?
Awesome.
And the next time was 15 minutes.
What do you think, in your experience and your expertise, what's the biggest hurdle for success? Personally, professionally, intimately, what would you say?
There's a few um, that are tied together, right? You can't get away from. One of them is emotional resilience, which is why we teach it, right? If you are stuck because of the fear and you just can't walk past it because you don't know how to, because you don't understand your own brain chemistry, you're done, right? Like that will stop you. You have to be able to move ahead. You have to have good mental models. Um, I'm constantly looking to figure out better mental models, better belief structures, right? And I hear people get stuck by their mental models all the time, and they'll say something like, "This is the truth," and I'm hearing them, and I'm realizing they believe it's the truth, but I have a different mental model. I'm like, well, actually, there's a different way to look at it. It's like this instead, and they go, "Wait, what? I don't how right?" And the third one is understanding power dynamics and how power exists in the world and how you can be self-empowered. And most people stop way short of empowering themselves to get, because we don't talk about power dynamics in the real world. And it's such an important topic because people who feel disempowered, until they wrap their head around that and they have the self-awareness, again, self-awareness, right? Until they wrap their head around that and start recognizing where they have power and recognizing how to use their power consistently, repeatedly, they're always going to feel less than, right? Because they're not actually demonstrating themselves their ability. And you mentioned confidence a few minutes ago. Alex Hormozy has this great quote about confidence is the result of doing things over and over and over again until you have undeniable proof in such a big stack that you can do something, right? And so that's where power comes from, is knowing you can make a change in the world.
Well said. I want to talk a little bit about the application in education. You've recently been focused on education. You are applying the 40% better system in this field. And I kind of want you to elaborate about what that is and what impact do you hope it'll achieve.
So it goes back to team leadership, right? And I'm niching into software right now, but this stuff applies across the board. My inputs have been everything from hospitality and military supply chain to first responders and race car teams, right? So I know this stuff works in a variety of contexts. Um, it's helping people get unstuck in their lives, and it's these 5 pillars. I mean, and I use these 5 pillars of parenting. Like I do this stuff with my kids all the time. Um, and and people don't move ahead because they don't know it's possible, and no one has given them a framework and a structure to go approach it. Right? It's like if you didn't know how to swim and nobody around you knew how to swim, you wouldn't take up swimming, right? And if you saw somebody swimming, you might think they were magic and be like, whoa, that's amazing, I can never do that, they're magic, right? But
Yeah.
American Red Cross has a system to teach anybody how to swim at any age. But if you don't know about that, then you're never going to become a swimmer, right? I'm a huge believer in behavior and actually doing things, right? Versus just reading about it. Because
Yeah. Yeah, it's almost like I always use this metaphor a lot. I always ask potential clients, is knowledge power? Most people say yes. So then I say, because it's the mind block of that's all they know, then I add, how about this? Is applied knowledge power? You see the difference? You can typically just pick up a book, read the book. However, if you're not applying anything to that to make
Yes.
your life better, your career, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of people are readers. There's a lot of readers. There's very few people that apply it.
Oh, you're
And
preaching. Yes.
yeah, and I'm all about applying. And so with 40% better, it's all about here's a behavior I want you to do. I want you to go do this with your team. Here's why it's really important, right? Go do this behavior. Set up 15-minute one-on-ones with everybody on your team once a week. Block off 30 minutes in your own calendar, 15 minutes in theirs. That way, if it runs over, you've got time, right? Find out what they're struggling with. That's a behavior. I want you to go do this thing, right? I'm not trying to give you a bunch of philosophical perspective. I just want you to go start doing this and hearing from your team, right? And I want you to document everything they tell you. It's teaching people to go take the action, right? It's the same way we learn math in school, or the Red Cross teaches swimming, or if you go to a racing school, they put you in a car and you're on the track, right? It's not just whiteboards.
Yeah.
And so it's all about do the behaviors that helps your team operate better. Oh, and by the way, you get to build your self-confidence on the way.
Yeah, which is a beautiful thing. So as we're getting to the top of the hour here, Bill, looking forward, what do you see as the next big challenge for leaders in the tech industry, and how do you think your system will evolve to address any of that?
Great question. So the next big challenge is getting efficient with human beings. And yeah.
That's beautiful.
And historically what's happened is tech leaders have said, I'll just hire more bodies. And we now know that companies are, you can't get 9 women to produce a baby in 1 month, right? Takes one woman 9 months, that's it, right?
Well, that's a great analogy. Yeah.
Thank you. And so, if you throw a bunch of bodies at a problem, you're not going to necessarily get the problem to be solved any faster. It might even go slower. What you have to do is get the right size team and get those people to be really efficient. When the team that I had that built that tool to save Walmart on Black Friday, I had 6 people. That was it. That was my team, right? We didn't have 40 people. If I had 40 people, we would have been way slower because there would have been way more coordination and way less collaboration. With that tight team, we were really, really efficient. And so one of the reasons that I've seen like companies doing layoffs right now is because somebody realizes they've overhired. The problem is they don't know how to be efficient with the teams they have to get those people to be high producing. And so, we've been optimizing hardware, right? Chips are faster and faster, Moore's law. We're getting so much more out of a smaller and smaller chip in terms of processing, but we're not doing that with our people.
Wow.
Because no one's thought about that yet in terms of how we're doing software engineering, right? No one's really looked at the problem that way.
Yeah.
And I'm about efficiency, right? I want things to be efficient and effective. And to a degree, I'm sure that, growing up as a competitive swimmer, you had to have an efficient stroke. It's not necessarily about how many strokes you take per lap. It's about how efficient they are. And so you have to get to that place of, what's the efficiency to get here, not just the volume.
Yeah.
So that I see that as the big hurdle, and that's what I built 40% better for, was to solve that problem.
Yeah, it's just connect. It sounds to me you're just connecting humans, and stop treating them maybe as objects, but as humans, and then understanding what their needs and wants are, so they can maybe be efficient. And
Right.
that's
Right.
really, really well said, Bill.
Thank you. Thank you.
Two more questions.
Yeah.
Kind of. So personal reflections. So I'm going to kind of get you to think through a little bit. I was like asking this question: is looking back at your career or on your career, what's one piece of advice you would give to your younger self? Especially while you now know that you've been in the tech industry. Maybe you can start with some advice with the tech industry, maybe some advice in career, personal, whatever it might be. What would you say to your younger self?
Always be curious, and always look for outlier data. Like
Explain.
that's good. Yeah. So outlier. So data exists on a bell curve, right? Height, weight, whatever it is, right? And oftentimes you get indications of what's possible when you look at the outside edge. And there's people that are constantly pushing the limits of how much weight you can deadlift, right?
Yeah.
Once upon a
But
time,
look at the times in the U.S. of the Olympics this year.
Right.
Like they were like crazy records. Yes.
Yeah, exactly, right. So that gives us an idea of what's possible in those contexts, right? And if you don't know about what's possible, you just make an assumption that, oh, this is all that can be done, right? And so I'm always looking for what are the outlier perspectives that are driving better performance, and it's in everything, right? Whether it's better processes for our project management, or is there a new database product we should be looking at, or Amazon Cloud has a brand new thing in beta that might help us to get more done on our servers for less money. Like whatever it is, it's what's the latest in neuroscience, right? I want to understand neuroscience really well because that drives my emotional resilience. All of that outlier data, and also it's, what is the place where I can go, oh, that pattern matches or it doesn't to my actual experience in life, right?
Yeah.
Like, diet fads, right? What happens in this particular, I've actually done that diet fad in the past, back before it was a thing. What happened?
Yeah.
Right. So there's all these different places where I want to not just be curious, but also what is the data I've got related to that from my own world.
Well said,
And
Bill.
yeah.
And I just want to say, what a great opportunity that you came on today, and the
Thank you.
value that you provide, and the continued emotional resilience that you're teaching companies. I mean, you can apply that in so many facets, and we really learned
Oh yeah.
a lot about that today. Can you tell the listeners how they can get a hold of you, from social media to websites, whatever credentials you have? Go ahead.
Yeah. So you can always reach me by email. That's like super simple. hello@40pb.com. Number 4, number 0, letter P, letter B.com. I'm on TikTok, where you first found me, I think. It's Bill Lennan, Bill, 3 L's in the middle, Ennan. I'm on LinkedIn, WB Lennan, and where else? We've got a podcast that we do also about leadership and team leadership. It's called 40% Better. You can find it on Spotify and Apple and whatever your favorite podcast happens to be, your favorite podcast channel. And then our website is 40pb.com. We try to be very consistent with our marketing.
Yeah, I see that, and it's very evident in what you do and who you are. And what a blessing today, Bill. And I want to just truly say thank you. And
Certainly. Thank you.
I'm gonna end on our outro. Don't go anywhere yet, though.
Yep.
I don't know if you listen to any of my podcasts, but here we go. Thank you, everybody, for listening. As always, 1% better, and you heard it only here on Framing New Heights. 1% better in mind, body, and soul. And always, come on, Bill. Stay flat. There we go. There we go.